and that could work, you know.
Yeah, but they don't sell that stuff in the stores anymore.
No, not anymore. Not anymore. You can order it online, but you can order everything online. So, it's not saying much.
Yeah, but you
You,
wouldn't want it traced to your account.
well, they charge extra for that, you know. But it's cool. It comes in a padded container, so if the FedEx dude drops it, it don't blow up.
That's what happens at a Mexican standoff.
Well, there is not a personal problem in the world that can't be solved with a creative application of high explosives. I'm just telling you, it's a fact. You can't get the lid off that jar, boom, there, it's gone. You know, can't get that one lug nut loose, boom, there, done.
I was going in a different direction. I was trying to push us
Oh,
into
okay.
a darker and mistier world of weird.
It don't get much darker than boom.
So I think we're live.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to.
Well, then let me do this. There, just so we've got everything clear.
All right. The views expressed on the Trampled Underfoot podcast do not reflect the opinions of their sponsors or affiliates. So there.
Yeah,
Yeah, you are free,
yeah.
free, free from all attachments. I
Hmm.
can come down to the
This
valley and come down to the river. We're gonna have ourselves a picnic, and we're gonna go into the river's water, and we're gonna perform some actions. I tell you.
mostly barbecue, but yes.
There will be fiddles, there will be guitars, and we'll do it again next Sunday.
See, now what you're doing is you're giving me Neil Diamond, Brother Love's Travel and Salvation Show vibes here. Pack
You
up
know,
the babies and grab the old ladies, and everyone goes.
one of the most, for me, enjoyable movies was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Uh-huh.
Which I don't know that you ever saw.
No, I haven't. I might know a little bit about it, but I've not seen it.
I don't know who the writers and slash directors and all that, but something Clooney, is it Robert Clooney? George Clooney.
George Clooney? Okay.
And the husband of, what was her name? That, damn it,
I don't know. That one girl?
Roseanne, the Roseanne show from the '90s.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Something Goodman,
Uh, um, um,
Al
I know
Goodman,
who you're talking about. I can't think of his first name.
something
Oh,
good,
man. John Goodman, I want to
John
say.
Goodman.
Okay.
So it was John Goodman, Clooney, or Robert Clooney, George Clooney, and all these pretty cool actors, and they're walking across America, or they're experiencing America in the 1920s, 30s, something to
Hmm.
that effect. And we have themes of on the river, women in the water, forests, small towns, fairgrounds, and just a lot of themes like pomade,
Hmm.
um, and all that stuff, which was set in a mystical, dreamy, like it's Americana, in my
Hmm.
opinion. It's so good. Um,
I've not seen it. I've,
it's really good. Look, it's not shoot 'em up. It's none of that.
yeah.
It's
Well,
more
you
like
don't
a tale.
necessarily need that.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it. It's really well
Hmm.
done, and cinematography, just all the different elements were put together so nicely. Whatever.
Jim Dockrell says, "Oh brother, where art thou?" was a rewrite of Homer's Odyssey. Did you
Oh
ever read the Odyssey?
no, I've read, or not read. I've watched documentaries, or what do you call those things? Uh,
Docudramas?
no, not docudramas. Lectures.
Hmm.
I've viewed lectures in the greater scheme of Greek,
Hmm.
mythology and philosophy and stuff, but I've never sat directly to that. I mean, no, I've not.
Um, have you ever seen, talking about Americana, have you ever seen a movie called Paper Moon?
No.
It was back in the, I want to say the early 70s. It was Ryan and Tatum O'Neal. Uh, Ryan O'Neal was her dad. Tatum O'Neal was about 7 or 8 in this movie, and they won. They were nominated for several Academy Awards and won several Academy Awards. Um, and what it is it's back in the late 20s, early 30s, down south somewhere. And Ryan O'Neal is a con man. And what he would do is he would look at the obituary. He'd pull into a town, look at the obituaries, and he had a trunk full of Bibles in this old Model T Ford. And he'd get out the Bibles and he'd get out his stamp kit and everything. And, this man died and his widow, whatever, you know, and he'd find their house, but he would stamp her name on the Bible and come up with there was this nice dedication on the inside of the Bible. And he would pull up to this house and knock on the door. The widow'd answer the door. Moses Pray from the Louisiana Bible Company, and yada yada yada. Are you Mrs. such and such, so and so? I'm looking for Mr. So and so. Oh, well, he just recently passed. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. He ordered this Bible for you and inscribed with your name on it and this, that, and the other, and opened up, showed it to her, and she just, oh, my darling, he did that for me. Yeah, ma'am, and I don't mean to be indelicate about it, but there's an outstanding balance of $7. And she'd be, okay. And she'd go get her purse and she'd give him $7 for the Bible, which back in the day was a lot of money. Somehow he ended up with this little girl. I don't remember the circumstances of how he ended up with her. She ended up going with him. They both got together in the cons.
They what?
And they both got together in conning their way across the South. And, ran into trouble here, there, and everywhere, got chased by people and stuff like that. It's really a good movie. It's basically a con man teaching this little girl how to be a con man.
Is that from the
And
70s?
yeah, it was. Let me see when that was made. Um, it was made in. Oh, come on. 1973. It was a fantastic flick. It's well worth it. Ryan O'Neal, Tatum O'Neal, Madeline Kahn, Randy Quaid, John Hillerman, P.J. Johnson. It's a good cast, and they were nominated for several Oscars and won several Oscars. So
Con jobs. I'll just add this one. I don't know what movie it is, but I've seen clips of it. You know how that is now, that you see clips that are interesting, but you don't have the context of what the
yeah,
movie is or anything. There's a lot of that going on with the fact that we have on demand all sorts of crap. Um, in it, the con job is the following: a lady pulls up to a gas station, and she's hot to trot. She's got a nice car, and she runs into the store and she says, "Oh my goodness!" Somewhere in the middle of nowhere. "Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! I lost my ring, my wedding ring. It's an expensive ring. It costs I don't know how many $1,000." Like she's like, "And can you help me find it? I dropped it on the ground." And the guy's looking and stuff. They can't find it. She's, "Oh my goodness! And I've got a flight, and I can't. Do me a favor. Look, I will give you a reward. I will pay you X amount of dollars. If you find it, here's my information." She gives bullcrap information,
yeah.
and just call me. I'll pay you for it. I'd really appreciate it. She says, "No problem, ma'am."
Hmm.
And she gets in the car and drives away. And then a little while later, Another woman shows up. She says, "Hey, I found this ring on the ground." And the guy's like, "Oh, that's right." And she says, "No, no, I found it. You didn't find it." "Oh no, I know the lady." "Well, how do I know that?" "No, no, no." He says, "Look, I'll give you it, but you have to give me something for it because it's mine." So the guy pays her money
Uh huh.
for the ring, and now he's got the ring. He knows he's gonna get the
The
the,
reward money, yeah.
the reward money. So the other girl that got the money leaves, and then around back somewhere down the road, she gets in the car with the first lady, and the
Hmm.
two of them drive off.
Wasn't a scene from Thelma and Louise, was it?
No, this is some sort
Okay.
of other movie. I don't know what.
Hmm.
I'd have to, but no. And I saw that movie too, some Thelma and Louise, but I don't know the plot now anymore.
Yeah, I don't either. One of the scenes in Paper Moon that stuck out to me, it's like, oh man. What they would do is they would go into a store and he would go up to the cash register. They go in separately. He'd go pick out something, go up to the cash register and pay for it with a $10 bill. And then leave, get the change and then leave. And then she would go up to the register with some candy and pay for it with a $5 bill. She'd get the change from the $5 bill, and she'd step away from it and stand there and then start crying, just making a big fuss. Lady would come out. What's going on? What's going on? You cheated me out of $5. My grandma gave me $10 for my birthday, and I gave you $10 bill, and you gave me $5 worth of change. And really making a big old fuss. And here comes the store owner or the manager, whoever it is. What's the matter, dear? This lady stole $5 from me. No, no, she paid with a $5 bill. I paid you with a 10. My grandma wrote "Happy Birthday, Addie" on that $10 bill, and I gave you a $10 bill. So the manager goes over to the cash register, opens it up, takes the top $10 bill out, and on the back it says "Happy Birthday, Addie." And so she gives her another $5 change for the 10. So they got change for the 10 twice, plus change for the 5. So they just, you know, stuff like that. But
It's
I tell you, man, it was kind of fun. The
um,
movie's called Paper Moon, and it's well worth it. It's well worth watching.
a few weeks ago, maybe last week or the week before, I was at the groceries and I paid the lady. I pulled a 50,
Hmm.
which is nothing anymore, by the way. A
Yeah.
50? What's a 50? Everything's. I mean, I'm sorry, but anyway.
Once it's broken, it's gone. It's just like $100 bill. If you break $100 bill, it's gone.
Um, so I pulled a 50,
Hmm.
and that's so true. It's that's exactly how it works.
Hmm.
That's why it's best to deal in pennies and nickels and dimes. Um,
So,
that's how you work it. Um, and so I gave her the 50 to pay for my stuff. And she pulls out two 20s and she pulls out two 20s and like $2 $3, like I don't know what the story was, and she hands it to me like this bulk of money from my 50, which was a lot of money because it was like basically I bought all
hmm.
this stuff and you're giving me all my money back.
Hmm.
And I was like, look, I don't want you to get in trouble, but I gave you a 50, you're giving me back almost a 50. And she says, no, no, you didn't, you gave me 100. And I said, did I? And I opened my wallet, and there was 100 still. And I'm sorry, my 50 was still in there. The
Oh.
the 100 was the. How was it? Yeah, my 50 was still in there. It's the 100 that I gave her
Hmm.
due to my glasses. You see what I'm saying? I gave her
Yeah.
the dude. I was like, holy smoke, because I felt like the funny thing is, last thing I'll say is that for a moment there, I felt like money was regenerating in my wallet.
Yeah, really. Got a magic wallet. Open it up and you hear ring. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Um, yeah, you open up your wallet and you hear my 50's back. Yay!
I love it. Does everybody hear that?
Yeah, everybody hears that as far as I know.
That's awesome.
Al, Kilroy's Odessa Woodworking Shop and Maker Shop. No more pennies being minted, so save your pennies. You know, is that real? Is that official, Al? Because they've been saying that for, oh God, at least 40 years that I know of. They've been arguing about whether they should keep minting the pennies or not.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't like the implications of that, to be honest with you. That means a lot of different things, which I'm not going to get into. But,
Yep, heard it. Okay, well, all right. I'm going to have to
well,
check it out.
on that theme, though,
Hmm.
here in Florida, our governor, um, I don't know if it's official yet or if it's going to be for 2026,
Hmm.
but we are now going to be one of the few of the other states that accepts gold and silver as legal tender.
Okay.
And Ron DeSantis's explanation for it
Hmm.
is that in order to that Florida has always been ahead of the curve when it comes to many of these things.
Yeah.
That's why he and our legislature is always, well, let's tongue in cheek slightly because
Yeah.
we got to balance it. But whatever, that's certain directions are going
Hmm.
in the right direction. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
In terms of they're trying to go for reduction in this whole, housing taxation thing and like stuff,
Right.
but in other areas, whatever. But in the gold thing, his explanation was that we have to be ahead of the curve at the devaluation of currency, um, you know, which
Hmm.
is which is we want to give Floridians and options to be able to maneuver economically,
Hmm.
and so yeah, so there you have it.
Yeah.
Not everybody's gonna, not everybody need. It's not something that you're forced to do as a company.
Hmm.
I could say you go to J.C. Penney's or whatever, and now somebody comes with like
Well, I can remember that happening in the 70s when gold and silver went crazy high. It's the late 70s and I think early 80s. I think it lasted till like 81, where gold and silver were just, I mean, huge. And there were car dealers advertising here locally that you could buy this brand new, for example, Datsun 240Z, which was, a fairly pricey car back in the day, for $250 in silver quarters, half dollars, or dollars. Because the silver, it was worth more in silver than it was the face value of the coin.
yeah,
So if you brought them $250 worth of quarters, half dollars, or dollars, they'd take it and you go with the car. There were some companies that were taking gold as well. Everybody had those little file kits with the acid. You rub it on the stone and then you touch it with the acid. It turns the right color. Yeah, okay, that's real gold. You know, and all kinds of stuff like that. But then that kind of died off when price of gold started coming back down. But
yeah,
it was wild for a while there.
yeah. I
Now,
like the idea of
I,
gold, but you have,
I don't see an issue with it. And as far as the pennies, we've had a couple people. Um, Al said, yes, it's official. U.S. Mint will stop producing new pennies. Treasury Department announced it'll phase out production of new pennies in early 2026. Okay. All right. We, now, Jim Dockrell up in Canada, we haven't had pennies in Canada for quite a few years now. they round up or down except on electronic transactions. Okay, so if they don't physically have to hand you cash back, they'll either round up or down, and it all comes out in the wash. That's the way they did it over in Germany. We didn't have pennies in Germany either, and where they could, and pennies were only used in like the military base post exchange or the commissary. The post exchange is where you bought. It was like a department store. You electronics and music and clothes and housewares and things like that.
Did
And then
Al
the
say round
huh?
up? Or, did Al say round up?
No,
Or
Jim Dockwell did.
did
They
Jim Dockel say? Well, let me. Did Jim Dockel say round up or down?
uh-huh. Yeah. And the commissary was where you bought groceries. And it was the same thing. If your total was $4.21, you paid $4.20. If it was $4.27, you paid $4.30. So if it was five or less, well, if it was four or less, you rounded down. If it was six or more, you rounded up. And it all came out in the wash.
So I have the reason that I said I don't like the thing is because of what what it suggests, which is obvious, right?
Hmm.
You know what it suggests, right?
Well, I want to hear your opinion. Go for it.
So the fact that we don't need pennies anymore, or that it's being washed
Phased
out,
out, yeah.
faded out, is that it's no longer convenient because if a dollar gets you less, a penny that much more. And so it's a representation to me, or a symptom of, or a result of actual symptoms of how the money becomes cheap, less and less purchase power wise, you know, value.
I would say 99%. Well, I won't say 99%. Definitely 75% of transactions anymore are electronic. And this won't affect those at all. If it's $1.37, it'll be $1.37 that'll get deducted from your account or charged to your credit card, whatever. Because you don't see change. It's it's the people that use nothing but cash that will see it. And I have a feeling you're going to see, because what the PX used to do, the post exchange used to do, was they would do everything they could to round everything to the closest nickel so that you didn't see any of that stuff. So it would be 225 or 220 or 230. You wouldn't see 237. Not that it didn't happen, because there were still things that were 1999 or 4162 or something like that. But where they could, they would round it to the closest nickel on pricing so that you didn't see that. And they would do the same thing. They would round up or round down, but the store can charge whatever they want. So,
Yeah, I just see it as a the need for pennies was because it bordered the dollar would sometimes cross over, or
mhm.
the cost of a thing plus the tax and
Well,
whatever combination of things would either not reach the crossing of a dollar of that bill,
mhm.
or overtake it by a fraction, and then the pennies would fill in the blank along with the nickels and such and this
Mhm.
and that. But that fraction,
Mhm.
that 1 in 100 that penny represents, still to this day, obviously, and it still will.
Mhm.
But the idea, because the math is still there, but the
Yeah.
idea that that penny is no longer going to be something circulated in terms of new
Hmm.
production and this
Well,
and that
and,
is
and
a
and and make no mistake, you'll still be able to use pennies. It's just they're not going to mint anymore.
yeah, but I'm not, you know, where, so I get that. So my whole direction is just simply that it's a representation of how there's no practicality, or the 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 result has been that they've decided that it's not practical. It's probably a waste of money.
Yeah,
Um,
it costs them more to mint the pennies than they're worth.
right, and so to me, it's just a representation of that sort of trajectory of money going down in purchasing power. So to me, that's more of the thing. But I get it. I mean, if it's going to
Hmm.
be, you're going to print something that's going to be more expensive to print it, you know.
Yeah,
So what the heck's the point? You know,
yeah.
I get
You
that.
know, if it costs 7 cents to mint a penny, why would you do that? You know.
Yeah.
So, um, but some things go a little bit further. Do you know why there's the odd pricing like that? Why it's $21.99 and not just $22?
Yeah.
Or why that's it? You know why that's that way? Okay, well then there goes next.
Well, yeah, I worked in retail.
Okay, well for the folks that don't know, that was done so back in the day when all this stuff first started coming about. The cashier would have to open the drawer because if something was a dollar even and the customer handed the cashier a dollar, they didn't have to ring it up. They could just put it in their pocket and nobody would be the wiser. But if they made it $1.05 or 99 cents, they had to ring it up to give that customer change. So it was done to keep the cashiers honest. So they couldn't just put it in their pocket and walk away with it. You
So
know.
that's different than what I had in mind. I could see the logic in that, but um, I was what I had in mind is that two things. One is that, you know, if you have something for $30, that's $30. But if you have it for 29.99, that is a selling point in terms of it overcomes the objection of the person, the casual or active buyer, where they see, you know, a two, you know,
Instead of a three, yeah.
and then the other one was that based on the state collecting its portion of, or the, you know, federal government collecting its portion of that purchase as far as tax,
Hmm.
that would create the extra digits that would fluctuate that.
Yeah.
And so those were the two. But as far as the theft thing, I didn't, that part I didn't know.
Yeah, that goes back to, I want to say, the 1910s that really started to take off because back then a dollar was a lot of money. You know, if a kid had a nickel, it was like a kid today having $20. And you can get a lot of stuff for a nickel back in the 1910s. So, you know, a dollar was a huge amount, and you bet they stood there and they waited for that change because a penny would still buy quite a bit of stuff. So the store owners basically started doing that, adding, making the price odd so that the register had to be opened and that money had to be accounted for. So, yeah, I mean, you know, going back to the old con man thing,
Yeah,
but
it's everything.
but
So I've come to the conclusion, but it's always tentative. But still,
mhm,
con jobs or scams or rackets,
mhm,
as opposed to them being the odd occurrence,
mhm.
are the norm, whether legalized or not. Although you can argue that legalized, it removes the label of con job.
Mhm.
but at which point we could call it all a form of manipulation in order to extract value from other people, whether it's something legal, pseudo, on the fence, legal, not
Hmm.
legal, and or completely legal or illegal. That more often than not, there's more of this um, con job quality occurring at all levels across the sphere. And I mean, it's just like,
Well, it is a fact. Everywhere you leak, somebody is going to hang a bucket.
yeah,
And in
that's
fact,
basically,
some states have a law that if you advertise something is on sale, you have to show what the price was, what the regular price was, and then have your advertised sale price. Because there were some unscrupulous retailers who would, well, they'd put they got a bunch of this stuff and they need to get it out of here. This particular brand of coffee is just not selling. So they put it out in the middle of the transit aisles. Big sign on it that says price reduction. And here's the price. And it was the same price it was on the shelf,
yeah,
or maybe even increased about a quarter or something like that. So some states, not all of them obviously, have gone to the point where you have to show what the original price was if you're going to advertise something as being on sale or reduced price or
yeah,
special clearance or something like that. So just something to watch out for. I mean,
yeah.
and
There were,
they will still try that. You can occasionally see pictures taken in Walmart
uh,
where the price is $2.69, and then down below it says was $2.69. Same price. They just put a big sale sign up. But
yeah,
some people, the gullibility of the customer, people go, "Oh, look, that's on sale. It's only $2.69." And grab two of them, throw them in the basket, where they wouldn't have looked at it if it was still on the regular shelf for $2.69. You know.
yeah. There's definitely, uh, we've been trained, and there's different sensibilities of it, but there is a sense that when you go to Walmart or any other business, there's a sense of trust that you're going in there. They have things set up so that the environment, I mean, this place is taken care of within
Mm-hmm.
reason. Everything's in its proper place within reason. And you feel like you're in a place where they're there to cater to you, which is
Mm-hmm.
the story. So it makes people feel comfortable enough to trust the environment that they're in and
Yeah.
the items that they're putting out, plus the prices that they're labeled as. And you
Right.
have occasional concerns where somebody will say, "Wait a second, is this price or this
Yeah.
is on this rack, but it doesn't seem to be the price." Like you have that, but in general, people accept this because it's the system that we've been. But with that trust comes things like what you're saying, where there's iffy behaviors,
Yeah.
and with enough people in volume, these companies make a killing off of something that is not necessarily
Well,
on sale. So it's like,
it, a lot of that stuff is kind of going by the wayside, because corporate's gotten it so involved, because every meme out there that shows, a Walmart sign where it's 269 on sale and the regular price is 269, every meme like that looks bad on them. So corporate is really coming down on the individual stores, and the individual store managers have less and less control over what they can and can't do. They have to get corporate approval, and that's to avoid stuff like that. But and a few other things, like Jim talking about. So they jack the price up a month before the sale. That has happened, and I'm sure it still happens today. But less and less so with the corporate overreach, or overwatch rather, and overreach. I mean, that has become the excuse. Like in our local Walmart, when I buy soda, I buy it in the 2 liter bottle. I'm an old man, yes. I don't like it in the can. It tastes like a can. Give it to me out of plastic. But they put the 2 liter bottles up on the top shelf. So I'm up there on my tiptoes trying to grab hold of these 2 liter bottles with a little plastic guard in front of them. I have I have gone over to the aisle where they sell the brooms and gotten a broom off of the shelf and used that to get my soda down. Um, and bitching the whole time. There was one time one of the maintenance guys was doing something. I don't remember what he was doing, but he left one of those roll around ladders on the soda aisle or on the next aisle over, rather. I just flipped. They were gone. Wasn't nobody around. Okay, I just flipped up the little foot brake, wheeled it around, stepped up there, grabbed all my sodas down that I wanted, put them in my cart, flipped the little thing up, took it back over, I put it back where I found it, and split. Went on ahead and did my shopping. I'm willing to bet you if you go to Walmart and you look, you will see all the sodas on the top shelf with that little clear plastic guard in the front to keep them from flying off the shelf when they come move forward again.
Yeah.
You know, but if you look and if you watch the employees, especially the guys pushing around the carts that are filling orders from people who did their shopping online, they know all the secrets. And I watched one of them go over to this one. You got the sodas on this side of the aisle, and you got the bottled water on this side of the aisle. And a lot of it is sold by the case, so they have pallets on the floor, and there's cases of water piled up there. One of them reached back in between two racks, grabbed this. There was a piece of steel, round stock. They'd bent over into a hook on one end. And he went over and he yanked down a couple of sodas, put them in his little thing, and walked over and put that back. And I'm like, aha, okay. So now when I'm in that particular store, I go over and I grab that thing and I get my sodas down with it and go put it back. And I've seen other people do it too. And I'm like, make sure you put it back or they're going to take it away from us, you know?
Yeah. There's been a change in the,
Mm-hmm.
and I can, because Miami's a big place and there's lots of businesses and stuff. There's been a change in the quality of the service when it comes to the employees and
Mm-hmm.
their ability to attend customers,
Mm-hmm.
even apart from the niceties of, like, warm hellos and such and this and that.
Yeah.
There's been a change on that level. There's been a change on pricing. There's been a change on just the experience quality as a whole
Yeah.
in places, um,
Yeah.
and that's been very noticeable,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially from 2020 till now.
Uh,
You
I,
know,
I, don't, I don't know about your stores or your local statewide politics, but around here, um, the first thing Walmart did when they started talking about raising minimum wage to super high amounts, Walmart no longer open 24 hours a day. They close at 10 at night and they open at 6 in the morning. So they eliminated a whole shift of employees. They stock in the late evenings where they used to stock shelves overnight. They now stock in the late evenings and the store is closed at 10 p.m. Then they went whole hog on the self checkout and they removed 14 cash registers, 14 checkout lines, and made that area self checkout. And there are maybe 3 cash registers with a person there open. And that's about it. So they have eliminated a lot of jobs in the store. There were fewer employees out on the floor. But then they shot themselves in the foot because of shoplifting. Certain things now have to be put in a glass case. Now you got to go find an employee to open that up so that you can get your cough medicine or whatever. A lot of it is in the pharmaceutical department, but there are other things, small appliances that are expensive. They lock those up as well. But I don't know. It's kind of weird that they had to do all that. And that, like I said, they shot themselves in the foot because now these employees who were stocking shelves during the day get called off to come open a thing so a guy can get his NyQuil. And sure enough, if it's funny, it's kind of like they, oh my god, they opened the door, so everybody has to flock to that aisle to get what they need since the guy with the key is there, you know. So it's a crazy situation, but it's all done because of this increase in minimum wage. It's like, okay, you know, if I have to pay a wage of 2 employees, we'll eliminate 1 employee there, and that's what they did. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, yeah. It, there's there the problem is systemic in my opinion, where
Mm-hmm.
um, that's true. If you're gonna pay, if you're gonna force someone based on laws, I
Mm-hmm.
guess it would have to be a federal thing, or is it a state?
It's a state thing.
So, so if you're gonna force an amount per employee,
Mm-hmm.
then the business. If I were the owner of the business, and I mean, it's different. Small business, big difference. It's just
Yeah.
scaled up. But like, let's say, I'm gonna do that math and balance with how much is going out and like all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
if I found that this is a burden and I can
Mm-hmm.
eliminate that and return to acquiring profits, I'll just basically rework things so that it fits my agenda because
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one that runs the business and the story.
Yeah.
And so I'll cut half the employee, like whatever the case. I can
Mm-hmm.
see that that's the result, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and a company is in no um, they're not forced to operate. So if you get to the point where
Yeah.
you abuse so like that
Mm-hmm.
that forcing the hand goes too much, but these people make a killing at the same time. But they do have to
Well,
work with.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
But they do have to work with what? Go ahead. Finish your
They
thought.
do
I'm
have to
sorry.
work with margins,
Yeah.
where there's products coming in, products coming out,
Mm-hmm.
insurance, all these things. So there's this whole um, you know, uh, uh, different things that they have to look at. Um, and so, anyways, on the other side of that, which has nothing to do with the company because they can do whatever they want in
Mm-hmm.
theory within the law. On the other side of it, you know, I've looked at the numbers and basically the wages, no matter what,
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with the company itself. They're paying what they're paying, and that's just it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not nothing, but
Mm-hmm.
they're well within their rights to say, well, wait a second,
Yeah.
with that forcing of the hand. But when it comes to people's ability to acquire money through work, and the amount that money will render, um, in society at
Yeah.
large, be it bills, this and that, based on the loss of buying power from the money itself, period, and the
Mm-hmm.
wages in the same place.
Yeah.
It is an it is an evidenced, stable, um, solid thing to say that it's a disaster systemically, where you're getting more people, you're getting more people having to pay more with less money value. In other words, my dollar doesn't render me as much as before, and yet cost of living is rising. Like
Well,
the whole thing is teeter tottered.
that's a consistent thing, though. The cost of living is always going to go up. It's very rare that it goes down. And inflation and the value of a dollar is always going to go down. It's just been historically, the minute we went off the gold standard, historically, the dollar has lost value at a pretty steady rate. So, will it ever be worth zero? I don't think so. It's backed by faith in the U.S. government, in our ability to, keep paying our bills. So, but it is also a fact that when you increase the minimum wage, you also raise prices everywhere because the market will only charge what it can bear. they can't charge more money for products if people can't afford to buy them. But the minute people can afford to buy those products and the product is moving off the shelf, that's a signal you need to increase prices. And that's what will happen. As soon as things start moving faster, a price increase is done. Simply to slow down the sales and to get more profit off of each sale. So, I mean, it's all, I mean, these people have this stuff figured out. It's figured out. Nothing happens in a store. Let's stick with retail here. Nothing happens in a store by accident. Everything is planned out. Every can is placed on a shelf based on a layout that somebody has come up with. And if it's a brand name and not the store's brand, if it's a brand name, that brand paid to have that shelf space. They want their product at eye level, where it's the first thing you see. And they pay for it. But if you notice, you go into Walmart, a lot of brands are going away, and the store brand is taking over. You know, our local Walmarts here, all of them. Linda likes the Canada Dry sugar-free ginger ale. You can't find it. You can't find it in any of the Walmarts. You're lucky if you can find the regular Canada Dry ginger ale. But they've got Schweppes and they've got their store brand. But Canada Dry, maybe a little here, a little there, and forget about the sugar-free. Meanwhile, I can go across the street to Ray's, which is a local supermarket, and they got a whole shelf full of it. So it's not like they can't get it. It's just that they've chosen not to sell it. But here's this brand over here, you know. So,
Yeah, so putting your hand or forcing a company's hand
hmm
to raise um, wages.
yeah.
The the reason behind it and or the excuse, depending how you look at it, is that wages are not keeping up with the cost of living. The consequence of raising prices, or I'm sorry, of paying more for employees and
hmm
having the government require it, the consequence of that is, like I mentioned earlier, let's say I owned a business and now they're forcing me to do that. Um, I have now an obligation with my arm twisted behind my back to
hmm
pay more. And depending on various factors, but all things being equal, if I have more cost, I need to pass that on somehow.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
to maintain prices, I need to slash my employees and rework it enough so that I still get enough sales as
hmm
before, have the less employees, but I'm paying out more or less the same amount as I did before the
hmm
force of government, um, you know,
hmm
insisting that I pay more. Now, all that dynamic is something aside. I mean, it could be lumped in. Is
hmm
something aside with the fact that wages have not kept up with inflation,
You're right about that. They have not.
and that the cost of living for people to make ends meet across the country, not
hmm
every single person, but enough people where the sentiment is palpable.
hmm
Um, that said, this is not the only place where this force or this twisting of the
hmm
arm occurs. Um, because a company that brings in products from other nations around the world
hmm
based on extra taxes imposed and such also influence the cost of the products coming in that are
hmm
seen on the shelves. So it's
Right.
not just that thing, but
No.
in the broad picture, what I'm saying is that it's you can sense that there's enough tugging, pulling
Mm-hmm.
across the system where there's at least the sense or the impression,
Mm-hmm.
at least the sentiment that you hear, um, that there's tense moments. Um, at the stores like Publix, they tend to raise their prices flat out, and other people like Walmart tries to reel that in, but their Publix is a pretty big brand. But the point is
Yeah.
that we do have the option to either go to Publix or Walmart or any other thing. In my
Mm-hmm.
case, I've got those two options. There's also other options, but
Sure.
my Publix is just down the road,
Mm-hmm.
so the convenience
Yeah.
and the price
Yeah.
that it's slightly higher. Like for instance, coffee is a good example. Coffee is imported. Um, my tub of Folgers, the small one at Publix is like two.
You wish.
It's 2.35. Is like 7.30 something, 7.50 something, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
$7,
Yeah.
and at Walmart it's like $5. Now, before I didn't even think twice.
Mm-hmm.
Either place.
Yeah.
Publix was still more expensive, but it was such a fractional thing.
And it's so much closer. That's more convenient. Yeah.
But now, just looking at that $7
Mm-hmm.
is not just the $7.
Yeah.
It's that $7 multiplied by all the other items that are
Right.
increased, and the dollar not being able to stretch out as much as before. It's basically piled on. So this kind of world,
Mm-hmm.
I I I think it's fair to say was on from the pandemic this way. Before the pandemic, the although inflation was occurring, like the devaluation of the money, like you were explaining that it's a constant throughout history, which it
Mm-hmm.
has been. It has been a constant, except in a few occasions, and one of those significant occasions was from 2020 till now, where it's tripled
Yeah.
where it's lost. It's basically lost three times
Yeah.
the amount, leaving us at a dollar that's actually not a dollar.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually compared to, like, for instance, anything that cost a dollar back in 1998 today costs $2.
Mm-hmm.
And if you multiply, so basically, what I'm getting at is it's an incredible thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I believe something's got to be done. I don't know what's got to be done, but I think that it's extreme.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
We can't
Well.
pull a rabbit out of a hat or money out of our butt. So it's
Yeah.
out of nowhere. Out of it. So it's
Right.
like it's one of those things where it's like, man, they got to cool it with
Yeah.
their spending in terms of like
Yeah.
the organizations that be. They got to cool it. Like the governmental. They got
Mm-hmm.
to control yourselves a little
Well,
bit.
that ain't going to happen either. Freedom of the press is alive and well at the U.S. Mint. Uh, Jim Dockrell says, and why haven't prices come down with them getting rid of those people and going to self checkout? Where do you think they got the money for that self checkout? I'm going to play devil's advocate here, Jim. When the state comes along, U.S. federal, you said here that the minimum wage in Canada is $17.75 an hour, okay, which is $12.84 U.S. Our federal minimum wage is $7.25 right now, okay. But these people weren't being paid minimum wage, and what they did, the state raised the minimum wage here. It's $15 an hour. So double the minimum wage. Exactly double. What Walmart did, I'm going to use them as an example, was they let go of a bunch of employees. Now, you might think, well, that ain't right. What are they? But when you're talking about 5 or 10 employees, that doesn't really translate all that well. But think of all the Walmarts in the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
So if you're paying double for 1,000 employees, but you can get that work done by putting self checkout and keeping 500 employees, you're paying out the same amount of money, but you're still getting the work done with fewer employees you've got to pay into the unemployment fund for. You've got to pay a certain amount for medical. There's a lot of you hear about the wage that the employee is getting paid. You don't hear about all the other stuff the employer has to pay to have that employee. So, somebody making $15 an hour, the company is actually paying out about 25 bucks an hour for that employee because a certain amount has to go to various government agencies and insurance and all this other good stuff. So, and multiply that by the 50 states. I mean, Oregon doesn't have that big of a population. We've only got like 4.5 million people here. So,
Some people here have, in order to offset.
um,
Go ahead.
I'm going to frag you a minute here, Jim. Walmart annual gross profit from 2024, 7% increase. They can afford to share a bit more. In your opinion, what do they do with those profits? Those profits have to go to their shareholders, and a certain percentage of those profits have to go back into the business. You don't replace. They've got a normal operating overhead, but you don't totally remodel and reset a store with love. You got to pay for all that stuff. And when it comes to retail, you don't charge what it costs you to buy that item that you're selling. It costs you $5. You don't charge the $5 plus your markup. You charge what it's going to cost you to replace that item when it's gone. If you paid $5 for it and the next order is going to be $7, your price has to go up to $7 plus so you have the money to buy it. So yeah, a 7% increase in profits really isn't all that much, but across the board, your opinion might be that they could afford a bit more, to share a bit more, and they do with their shareholders. And a good percentage of Walmart employees are shareholders. So I'm sorry about that. Don't mean to call you out, but I have a real hard time when people say, "Well, that company makes billions of dollars, they can afford it." No, that's your opinion, and the money they made is yeah, it's a lot of money, but they're also the biggest company in the world. They have more employees than any other company in the world. you know and it's not like one guy sitting in Russellville, Arkansas collecting that 158 billion. It goes out to the people that own shares in the
So,
company.
so I have two questions. Whether Jim, yourself, or anybody else can look it up, or
Hmm.
two things. The implications can go any way, but how much does the head or CEO or of Walmart take in a year,
Hmm.
for contrast?
I have no idea.
And the second question is, because I did read this second part, but I don't know the details. But the second one is, what is the gap, or how do I say it? Across a trajectory of time, like past decade or two or whatever,
Hmm.
what is the gap in employee wages to CEO? How much CEOs have increased in their profits?
I've seen that dynamic and seen that metric run back and forth several times. And you're not going to like my answer, Eloy, but it's 100% irrelevant. It really is. Because the market's going to decide ultimately what that job is worth. Your labor is only worth what somebody is willing to pay you for it. You
Can
know?
I argue against it?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So this is how I would argue that.
Okay.
One, you don't know where I was going with that,
No, I don't.
but you said I'm not gonna. But you said I'm not
I'm
gonna like it.
well, I didn't think you were going to like it because that's how I was going to wrap it up, was saying that your labor is only worth what somebody's willing to pay you for it. But I've also got an eye over here on the chat, what Jim is throwing in here.
Well, let me just
And
finish my thought.
so go ahead. Yeah.
So that's one thing that. You, so a statistic,
Hmm.
a graph, a chart
Hmm.
is data.
Yeah.
The implications or the meaning or the narrative that
Hmm.
one draws from data
Hmm.
has different angles
Hmm.
from where one is viewing it.
Yeah.
We're both.
Yeah.
We
We're
both
both clear on
I
that. Yes.
accept that, and you
Yeah.
accept.
We're both clear on that. Yeah.
Okay. In other words,
Yeah. The person making
the argument.
the person making the $15 an hour is going to see things at the top differently than the guy at the top who has to pay 40,000 employees
That's
that
one. That's one
wage.
way to
Yeah.
look at it. Another way to look at it is if you take all the data
Hmm.
for a particular study over a particular question,
Hmm.
and the data is put in front of you,
Hmm.
then five people come into a room and sit down and begin to analyze or
Hmm.
interpret the data and the consequences of what that data suggests, points
Hmm.
to, from those different vantage points of an employee, of a
Sure.
government personnel,
Or
of a
somebody from the outside
distributor,
looking in. Yeah.
all these different
Sure.
positions that are pieces of society that are involved with that data, or
Hmm.
even external further away. But the point is that data is data,
Hmm.
interpretation is interpretation.
Sure.
And so where I'm going with that is this: it doesn't matter. You said it doesn't matter from your lens,
Right.
from what you're considering.
And all I can do is give you my opinion. Yeah.
From you could do more than give the opinion. You can do more than just give your opinion. I can do more than just give my opinion. I can consider the other vantage points while observing the data. So 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 my argument is that when you said that, well, you're not going to like it, I know that you were also focused on Jim, as you
Hmm.
said, is that me. And by the way, I don't even know what the data is because I was asking
Hmm.
if
Oh, Jim
now.
is right on it. The Jim is right on it.
Okay, I'll stop now. I'll stop. Well, I don't know what the see. I'm talking
Okay.
and I don't know what the actual Jim's right on it. I'm not looking at.
Hmm.
I don't even know what's going on down there.
Let me get to it. So hurry up.
Okay, I'll just finish now. So my point is that observing the data and just to see what the consequences
Hmm.
looking forward is at least something good to do. I'll stop there. Go ahead.
Okay. The reason I say I can only give my opinion is because that data to me is irrelevant. To me it's irrelevant. Okay, my opinion. Just to me it's irrelevant.
Yeah, but wait,
Let me
wait, wait,
let
wait.
me. Well, no. I'm getting to Jim stuff here.
No, but wait. Don't say no. No, you said that you. I understand that if you don't want to look at any other thing because you don't want to look at it is one thing, but you do understand that there's other ways to look at it.
You do understand that I already accepted that. I
Okay,
said that there are other ways of looking at it.
okay.
But and to me the data is irrelevant because I've had these arguments before. I got into a verbal knockdown dragout with an English teacher over oil prices back in the early 2000s when I was in English class. He was talking about obscene oil profits. And I did what every English teacher loves. I went and I did the research and I wrote a paper on it and gave it to him.
But we have a problem
But
with but we have
let me get to this over here, okay?
but wait one just one
All right,
point.
go ahead.
Just one point. The data is not irrelevant.
I didn't say the data was irrelevant. I said, for as far as my opinion is concerned, it was irrelevant to me because I've already researched all these things before, and I've come to the conclusion that it just doesn't matter.
So the data doesn't matter according to
No,
the conclusion that
it
you've
it
arrived at.
it doesn't. And let me get into this. Jim Dockrell says Doug McMillan, who is the CEO of Walmart, does not need nor is worth 27 million a year. My argument to that is, who are you to decide what anybody needs or what they're worth? That's your opinion. Walmart has decided that he is worth 27 million a year. And as far as what he needs, simply put, Jim, it's none of your damn business. It's none of my business. It's none of Eloy's business. None of us are in a position to decide who anybody else, what they need or they don't need. Simply put, you can say that. No one is worth that much in your opinion. I'll accept that. And I might even agree with that. But that's our opinion. CEO pay ratio was about 20 times the typical worker's pay in the 1950s. With that multiple rising to 42 to 1 in 1980 and to 120 to 1 in 2000. Completely and totally irrelevant. And here's why. The market decides wages. If you're not paying enough, you're not going to get the applicants and you're not going to get the employees. You have to raise wages to attract employees. You have to. That, or you're going to have an endless cycle like you're seeing in fast food, where you've got nothing but trainees and a revolving door, and you never see the faces for more than a week or two.
Wait a second. I have to let me.
Okay.
If not, I can't process what. I mean, it's good that you hold on.
Okay.
You just yeah, because I have to process.
Yeah, I just dumped a bunch.
Um, that last one that of the CEOs from 2000. Can you bring that
Mm-hmm.
one up?
Yeah.
Okay. You said that that's irrelevant, and then you
Yes.
proceeded to, dude. You said that that was irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. I'm supporting you. I'm back checking. I'm backing you up on this. Yes, I
Okay.
did say that.
You said that that's irrelevant,
Mm-hmm.
and then you proceeded to say that if employees aren't paid enough, then you have a revolving door of like
Mm-hmm.
and trainees and stuff.
Right.
Explain that this following and then you following explain that.
Okay, because what a CEO makes has absolutely nothing to do with what the employee makes at the individual store. What Doug McMillan, the CEO of Walmart, what he's being paid doesn't affect the wage of the people in the store. That it's not a cause and effect type of a situation there. The market decides what the people in the store are being paid. And if you've got enough employees to operate that store, great, and they're all willing to work for $10 an hour, fine.
But
Why
you're
would you why would you just increase their wage when you don't have to?
right, but you're this is what I see. This is what I see. You're preempting arguments
Mm-hmm.
that haven't been made.
Well, no, I'm linking this pay ratio, the CEO pay ratio that was brought up.
Yeah, but
It's 120 to 1 in 2000. My reply to that is so.
yeah, but it's the
It
equivalent. well, let me just say what's going on here, or what I see that's going on.
Okay.
What I see that's going on here is that you're looking at a typical um, argument for a typical position that cycles through, that is
Mm-hmm.
often touched upon, and you're preemptively leaping to that answer, assuming that the question will go in that direction. So you're just basically going around the bend and saying, look, the answer to this is that, so just let's put that to the side because that's not how that works. But the problem that and that's that. So I understand your point of a CEO making X amount of money. They're they're making money is rising across decades, and the employee's not. It's remaining in the same thing, and you arguing that amount that they're making has nothing to do with what the employee is making. It's not
Right.
like if he made less, they're going to make more
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, or even
Yeah.
probably at all, because there's two different domains. Like, I understand that whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
but here's my thing.
Okay.
I don't know if this is Jim's thing.
Well, he's still typing, but go ahead.
Jim's on fire. Jim's
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. He's on fire.
on fire. Okay, but let me just say, my thing is
Mm.
that I do not understand. Well, I understood because, like, what I just laid out of what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing, you could tell me that you're not doing that. That's what it
Mm-hmm.
looks like from my end. You'll tell me whether whether I'm being accurate in my observation or not. Am I, by the way, being accurate in what you're doing?
Fairly. Fairly.
Okay, I'll take that. But my
There's nuance, but yeah.
Oh, of course, but this is what
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that the metric itself, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
that chart would be,
Yeah.
we can replace it because it's the principle to starting base.
Mm-hmm.
That data is data,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing this particular data
Mm-hmm.
is not irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
It's irrelevant to you, fine, but it's data
Mm-hmm.
that's tracking. It could be how many people wear pink shirts
Yeah.
from 1998 till 2000. Like, it could be
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yeah.
Data may be irrelevant to one person or the
And
next.
it's gonna be interesting to somebody.
Well, this particular topic is
Mm-hmm.
interesting to a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
because it touches on not the direct correlation between whether or not, which, you know, um, the CEO making X amount of money, and therefore because they make more than, it's that's the reason these people make less. I get that point, but
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't, that just because it seems like they're connected, they're not. But it is a snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
This data is a snapshot. Interpretations is where you might, or I might, or any might take issue, because interpretations is what then brings in solutions to interpretations, and what those measures might mean, and all this and that. That's going down the road quite a while. But to me, it is not, to me, is not acceptable unless you find flaw in the data, misrepresentation in the data. But
Mm-hmm.
to juxtapose the wages of people remaining flatlined, let's say, or whatever the case might be, a jump, whatever the case,
Mm-hmm.
compared to the CEO, has other implications. Okay, because it's not just those two things. If you try to link the two the way you suggested, or the way that I um,
Mm-hmm.
said that you would suggest, and
Yeah.
I think that that's accurate of what you're trying to. Well, actually, you said you did explain that. Um, Maybe something to completely discard. I kind of agree that the two don't necessarily, but it is a snapshot of showing that
Well,
people are
sure. It.
basically people are basically getting paid the same amount. The dollar is going less and less. Is dropping in value
Right.
across time. CEOs are making more. It shows a disparity in society at large, where people are paying more for living, making less.
And I will agree with that. Wages have stagnated. I've been arguing for better wages for, oh God, since the 1980s.
That's all I'm
Wages
saying.
wages do not keep up with prices.
That's all I'm saying.
I'm serious.
But
But
mainly I'm saying that the data is one thing, and
well,
then the interpretations and solutions are
and
totally
that's the problem, the interpretation, because you can make any argument you want based on that data.
yeah.
That's why I say it's not interesting to me and it's not relevant to me, because three people are going to look at that data and come to different conclusions. But
Okay.
at the end of the day, what the CEO of Walmart makes per year, whether you think it's an obscene amount of money or not, has absolutely nothing to do with what a cashier at the store is making or one of their truck drivers is making, because the market decides what that wage is going to be. Now, we get all cheesed off about the Walmart CEO making $27 million a year, but we don't blink twice about a basketball player making $40 million a year.
I
We
don't
don't,
blink. I don't blink twice about any of it.
yeah, we don't,
I could give a crap.
but I know, I don't mean you personally, but I mean society at large thinks nothing of a basketball player making 40 million a year, or a quarterback making $30 million a year. They don't even think about that. But if a CEO makes 10 million or 20 million a year, he's a criminal. And I just don't think that that's a fair comparison. You know,
The only time that I
so
don't that I care is if people are using the system and going through government to create the conditions through payoffs, favors, in order to allow their business to
right,
succeed at the expense of others, having unequal access to government. And in fact, I will say this, that's exactly what's been going on at a broad societal level.
but yeah,
They
to a point.
take government and they pair with government with an exchange of incentives. I mean, not all the time, every day.
Yeah,
Maybe I don't know if it's every day, but it appears that the conditions are set or have been set throughout time
yeah.
to favor
Well, yeah,
access because of power, wealth, and so on and so forth.
sure.
That's nothing. That's nothing odd to say.
Well, there's a reason why the CEO of GE gets to sit up in the box and watch the State of the Union address. It's not because he, gave him a fair price on light bulbs. Believe me.
Right. So,
It's an exclusive club, and you and I ain't in it. All right.
so what we see. So what we see is that exclusive club
Mm-hmm.
continues in this
Sure.
trajectory, and population at large
Mm-hmm.
continues at this. Now, if all things were equal and you didn't have, see, this is the thing about, well, I can't even mention that name, but if all things were equal and there was even application and that kind of acts, I mean, that's not even a reasonable thing to ask, but if it were that case, because I mean in real life that's not how things work,
I
but
was gonna say, how do you make it equal?
no, I
Mm-hmm.
know, but if, well, no, I'm saying, understand what I'm saying. If the government comes in and forces the hand of a company
Mm-hmm.
to pay employees more,
Mm-hmm.
favoring employees, that is strong arm of the government
Right.
on that company. But it is also true that it is strong arming, to Jim's point, although I may not agree with his ultimate path to get there, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But my point is that if it's true that strong arming to get employees more benefits by government interference,
Mm-hmm.
if that's true, then so is it true that a CEO type person, a person in the position to
Mm-hmm.
persuade the government to earn favor so he can knock out his competition,
Mm-hmm.
gain access to this, that, and the
Yep.
other.
We have a word for that. It's called corruption.
Well, my point is that the relationship that we're discussing here,
Mm-hmm.
you have the employees down here.
Yeah.
They don't have access to all that. They do through their representative voting, this and that.
Yeah.
But when all those people are corrupt, and let's back off on the corrupt thing, when all those people are involved in a system where access depends on status and interplay between private companies and citizen and government, they favor the routines they favor. And this view of this gap or chart between regular people and the powers that be, CEOs, and this and that, that gap widening across time does show something. All it shows is this: the gap is widening. Why
Okay.
is that? Whether that's so, there is something to be said where power is being consolidated across
Okay.
time.
But several things have happened across time. Let me make my argument for this. We keep hearing about the shrinking middle class. To Jim's point here, in the 1950s, the top 1% of wage earners had 8% of the wealth. Now they have 40% of the wealth. With these disparities, has the life of the majority of the working population got better? No, it hasn't. But it's not because of those disparities. It's because we have exported the high paying jobs. Think about that. From the 1950s to now, manufacturing has been basically exported overseas. And those were good paying jobs, those were high paying jobs. You had UAW workers making $40 and $50 an hour in the 90s. Okay? Those jobs are gone. They've been sent to Mexico or to Canada, where your minimum wage is lower, and they don't have the United Auto Workers Union to deal with. We lost a lot of manufacturing of what they call white goods: appliances, refrigerators, washers, dryers, stoves, and ranges. Our steel industry is basically non existent now. So, a lot of high paying jobs. Here in Oregon, the timber industry is a shadow of its former self. There were 13 mills in this little town of Medford. There's now one, and it operates 1 day shift, where it used to, that mill, same mill, used to operate 24/7. It closed on Christmas and Thanksgiving. That was it. But it ran 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week. All of those, Boise Cascade, Weyerhaeuser, Georgia Pacific, they're gone. So the average wage plummeted here. And the average wage plummeted all across North America. It did in Canada too, Jim. The average wage plummeted during that time. So, yeah, the top 1% had 8% of the wealth because there were more people with high paying jobs sharing in that wealth. Now, what we have is a service economy where lots of people working in restaurant industries, food and beverages, lots of people in the medical industry, not just hospitals, but small clinics, lots of lawyers. Oh my God, lots of lawyers. But we don't have a manufacturing base in the high paying jobs that we had during that time that you're talking about. We keep talking about the shrinking middle class, and it is a thing. It really is. Jim goes on to say people in their 20s and 30s have given up on the dream of home ownership, financial security, etc. That may be a case. That paints a pretty dismal future. That may be the case, but I have to throw my opinion in here and ask about expectations, simply because I bought my first house when I was in my 40s. I don't know anybody in their 20s or 30s of my generation that bought a house in their 20s, you know. Because in your 20s, you're still establishing yourself. In your 30s, you get into your late 30s, maybe you're ready. I bought my first house when I was in my 40s.
There's a
So,
stat that
you know.
I don't have off the. I'm sure it could be found, but that if you equate the amount of money that people had to save to get into a house, how long that would take them. I think I remember it said 2 to 3 years to get in and begin payments and this and that. Um, today is out of the question for most people by leaps and bounds. There's numbers. The gap. Okay, this this concept of the world that we live in here
Hmm.
in this hemisphere around the world, but like let's say in specific in this country, where there's this talking point from one side and talking point from the other,
Yeah.
um, and reason goes to you know I can reason the talking points on one side much clearer than on the other. I've realized a few things, and I'll just say everybody's concerns generally, like in a general sense, it's not all the time, but like everybody's concerned, whether they understand, whether I understand how they get there in terms of their conclusions is
Hmm.
one thing, but the concern is all valid.
Yeah.
The fact that people may add one and one and reach a different number than you or I
Hmm.
is the result. It's the interpretation of the data.
Yeah, and that's why I say throw the data out the window. Screw
No,
the data. You
no,
know,
no, dude,
because
no,
because of the manipulation of that data
no, no.
and the manipulation of minds based on that data.
Okay, let me push back briefly
Okay,
on
go
that.
ahead. Go
Let
ahead.
me just put from my point of view. I think that it is a. I think it is not a good idea. I think the idea. So I'm opposite of that in terms of what you're saying. I
Okay.
say continue with the data,
Hmm.
keep it keep it vigilant, but work on the um uh, the interpretation.
Hmm.
Work on clarification between people's assumptions of the data. It's true that people can use the data. If let's just go back to that. Just let me clear this idea up because that's a very important thing. The data is no more different than if people say, um, in this region of the United States, we have this type of fauna or flora, and we categorize them like this, that, and the other. And for the past 10 years, this type of herb has been more significant than this one, and this is the data. And okay, so that kind of like a projection,
Hmm.
based on the actual information,
Right.
should never be tossed and burned.
Okay.
Um,
I'm
sim-
not advocating that, but
you,
go
you
ahead.
you 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 did. You said get rid of the data.
In this one particular case, we were talking about the Walmart CEO making $27 million a year.
No, dude, let me
And
get my.
that's the data that I said screw that, you know.
Okay, okay. Let me clear this up. One thing to me is is the data. You can. So look, if you're looking for a graph that says workers to CEOs or workers, public workers to government workers, that's
Hmm.
another set of data, or high paying workers to low paying, like there's all
Hmm.
sorts of data.
Hmm.
All that conserve.
Hmm.
The interpretations, which is the battlefield of ideas and people, think tanks, and people with bad ideas and others with good ideas, or lukewarm and this and that. That is the battle of whether we toss or save. But the data part is basically just saying, hey, this is
Yeah, this is what happened. Yeah, and I'm
right,
not saying when I say toss the data, I mean in terms of this argument. I don't mean in terms of no, don't keep track of those things and no, throw that paperwork away. No, that's the data is generated for a reason. That is needed. That's needed for audits. That's
right,
needed to make sure people aren't skimming money off the top.
right.
The data has its importance.
That's
In
it.
terms of this argument, it's totally irrelevant to me.
But
To
you're the
me.
but you're the only one that made the art. I don't know if Jim's made that argument, I've
No,
not.
he
I
hasn't.
know the argument that you're making. You're making it with the thing in mind that if we use government to force the hand of CEOs or companies to raise that minimum wage, then they will get their just reward, which is a raised wages to the inflation and so on and so forth. Because look at the CEO. That's the argument that you're rejecting, roughly thereabouts. But but I've not made that argument.
No, you haven't.
I said that so, but I'm still saying that the data is relevant. I don't know if Jim's making that argument,
No.
like what I just said, but I know that that's the argument that you're fighting against, and I understand why, because just because a CEO makes a kabillion times more than
Hmm.
employees, that linkage directly doesn't necessarily say that because this guy has, the other one doesn't.
Right.
Um,
It's not a
and,
zero sum game.
but 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 it does paint a picture where you have a situation where you have this consolidation of businesses that service the country, and and maybe they're doing it right, and then
Hmm.
people are paying for the thing, but there's also questions of access and and rubbing,
Okay.
with
But
government, and then that's an objectionable thing. Some of it needs
okay,
to be done. Go ahead.
who's painting that picture? You said that paints a picture of the haves and the have-nots. Who's painting that picture?
I am.
Okay, so it's your perception. Okay. And
Yeah.
that's legit. That's fine. But you're not the only one that's painting that picture. All I'm doing is I'm arguing for a free market economy. That's all
But
I'm doing.
but see, that's
So you said something about if all things were equal, how do you get that equality? There is only one way that I know of where everything is equal. And your family's already experienced that.
yeah,
That's the only way I know of to make sure that the doctor makes the same amount as the butcher, who makes the
yeah,
same amount
but
as the bus
but
driver.
that's not. But you're framing
So,
it not the way I argued it.
no, that's not the way you are. That's not the way you argue it.
What was my
I
argument?
agree with that.
What
I
was my
agree
argument?
with that. Well, you were saying that if all things were equal, you wouldn't have the government access to this company and that company and the other company. My argument is it's never going to be equal. It's never been equal,
No, I didn't say
and
that it
it
was
will.
going to be though.
And it will. No, I understand that,
That
but
is my argument. That was my argument that you just
right.
said. But I didn't say that was even possible.
I'm not arguing anything that you said. Other than the equality thing, and it's the same thing with Jim over here. Okay, it's this constant pitting of the haves versus the have-nots, or the perceived haves versus the have-nots. It's real easy for a guy making $15 an hour to look up at the top and go, "The CEO is making $27 million a year," and be pissed about it. But he doesn't know a thing about what a CEO does or even is because he's in a minimum wage job. Minimum wage was never meant to be a living wage. It was meant to be an entry level wage. Okay? That's one thing.
But the majority of
The,
the
the,
jobs aren't living wage. Period. Anyhow.
and that's because we've eliminated all the middle class jobs that are really good paying. That's my point. We have made it so expensive to do business here that you can't find a washing machine that's made in America
No, I
or
get.
Canada.
No, I get it. But I'm saying
And
that.
and those were the high paying jobs that shrunk that level between the haves and the have-nots.
And who did that?
You know, who did what?
Who created the conditions for that to happen?
Well, government
Government
and
and who?
us, the buying public.
Wait a second. Government and
Well,
company.
yeah, government regulated a lot of these industries out of the country.
Right, because the paying public, the 15 or the $7 an hour guy, regular Joe, filling
Hmm.
paint cans,
Hmm.
that equation, he falls into it in the grand scheme of things, but he
But
doesn't
here's
fall into it in the specifics.
no, not in the specifics, but here's what I'm getting at. The $7 an hour guy that you're talking about can't afford a $500 washing machine. He's got to go for the $220 washing
You
machine.
just made an argument.
Where is that $220 washing machine made? China.
Dude, let's pause for a second.
People shop with their wallet, dude, and I'm telling you,
Yeah,
more
but
of
you're
them
making an
compare
argument
price
that
than
I don't.
anything else.
Okay, I'm not arguing none of that. Like I agree. Like granted, 100% on the table. That's not what I'm arguing. I
Okay.
I asked you whose fault was it, and you said government and all of
And
us.
government and the buying public.
Right. And I paused you and I said, well, wait a second, Mark. Government and how about the companies? Because the buying public and regular Joe filling paint cans, they're just like today. Between them and the CEO, there's no correlation there. There might be the broader context where correlation, everything is connected. But putting that to the side, back in the 1970s and
Hmm.
forward, um, government's pressure on companies
Right.
to extract money.
Well, regulation, yeah. A lot of regulation.
They're extracting money. They have to
Hmm.
comply. They have
Yeah.
just look. They're
Yeah.
extracting money.
And
They're
what a
extracting.
shock. And what a shock. Companies don't like to pay fines.
Right. I'm getting to that
Hmm.
because none of this like I'm poor with the whole thing. Like we've talked about this for years,
Hmm.
but this isn't okay. So but whatever. So I'll say that. And then what would I do if I was that company being hammered on? Well,
Hmm.
I'm gonna call up Indonesia somewhere and I'm gonna
Yep.
say, hey, look, and then my toasters can be made over there, whatever the hell.
Hmm.
And then you have manufacturing exiting and this and that
Hmm.
and the other.
And with the associated wage drop.
Okay, now products are made less expensive,
Hmm.
on par sometimes depending on the product, sometimes less,
Right.
sometimes more. It depends also.
Hmm.
But now it's exited because of those regulations you said. No concerns over employees. Now they're taking care of that
Hmm.
over in somewhere in Asia and this and that, and they're shipping stuff in. The government is now supplementing themselves economically from the imports of these things to whatever
Hmm.
degree and this and that, through taxes, this and that. And companies are now putting cheap products out on the shelves
Hmm.
cheaper because now
Hmm.
there's a cheaper, so there's wiggle room there and this and that. That's more or less roughly in agreement with what
Right.
you were explaining.
Right. But
Um,
let me throw in one more point to
is
add
it
to that.
is it in agreement with what you're saying?
For the most part, yes. But I
Is
want
it
to add in.
okay?
But I want to add in one more thing about that because coming from the company standpoint, all right, if all these regulations and wage increases and things like that, if all of that being what they are, if they could still sell that washing machine for $500 here, and people were still buying them, they'd do it. They would comply with the regulation because they could still sell the product. That's what I mean when I say the buying public, rightfully so, is also a cause of things moving overseas.
Everything.
It's because we won't pay $500
Look,
for that washer.
look,
We want the $250 washer.
look, everything is interconnected,
Yes,
but the elements. Look, the
that was
element.
my argument.
Yeah, but everything is interconnected.
That's
And
what I
every,
mean. That's my argument.
let me proceed.
Hmm.
That if that's your argument,
Hmm.
then similarly, the CEO with the one guy, to whatever degree, is also interconnected because everything is connected because it's an economy.
Hmm.
If you're gonna take that position, and I agree with you, at that level, there
Hmm.
is a connection
Right.
between the CEO making all this and the dude at the bottom making all that. There's a connection because it's all part of the economy, and there's some reasons
Right.
for it, including what we just said.
Right.
Granted, but the catalyst was government interference
Right.
pushing buttons
That.
on companies,
Hmm.
and then the exiting of those jobs and those
Hmm.
productions, and then and so the issue is interference. My point is that this the relationship between these bigwigs and government, which, like you said, that's never going to change necessarily. I mean, I don't. Maybe it would, but I agree with you. That doesn't seem like something that, if you have power, you
Hmm.
have access to rub elbows, and business dealings are made, and other people are left out. I It just totally makes sense to me. Now the details on that, and calling the CEO of Hungry Burger, a crook, I wouldn't go that direction. I wouldn't call
Right.
the CEO of Walmart that neither, or Publix, or any of these people. They're working in a system.
Yeah.
And if I were in that position, I would think that I would have the what do you call it, the ethical this and that. But the truth of the matter is, like Jordan Peterson says,
Yeah. If you
you're
were
in not
offered 27 million bucks, you're going to take it.
if you're in Nazi Germany in 1942, and you're behind and you're part of that group, is your conscience going to move you at risk of pain of death to go against the Hitler, like, and all this and that? So he says, we're not only the good. We like to think we're the good guys. Sometimes we're the medium guys. Sometimes we're the bad guys. Human beings are complex and stuff. And
Exactly.
so I understand the system is like, I get it. All I'm saying is that, just like it would be a manipulation
Hmm.
to force the hand of a company to pay the employee, because it's a direct command
Yeah.
from government to
Hmm.
the CEO, to the, whatever.
And of
Similar.
course,
Well, no, but let me link the chain. Similar in reverse, where, let's call it collusion for this thing, although it's a little bit aggressive, but not really, but it is at the same time, where they make deals that excludes, that the public has not access to, only through voting. But it's so diluted at the voting level that change is funneled up to a few actors that work with each other. If government respected free markets, like you said, I believe in free markets. I do too.
hmm
If there could be a little bit of, like, there has to be some guarding, like import export, some thing, but overextending manipulation of government in the market is not acceptable. It's normal throughout history, but it goes in one direction. Really, at the end, power consolidates. It's just normal to do.
yeah,
So this chart thing, what we're watching, it's a fact, as far as
yeah.
I know, that wages have stagnated, and freaking,
I
you know,
and I agree. Wages have stagnated,
yeah,
but there's a reason wages have stagnated.
yeah, we've gone through the whole thing.
You know, so and it's no one entity's fault. It's because that's the one thing that people don't think about when you start talking economies, and that is the economy is not static. It's dynamic. It changes by the hour. You can sit there and say, we make this much money if we tax people 10%. Well, we'll make this much money if we tax them 20%.
Yeah.
It looks good on paper in a static situation,
But
but
people
the
aren't.
economy is not static. It's
Right.
dynamic. It's constantly moving.
Yeah.
And you can't, I don't care who you are, you can't
Predict.
project how many people are going to take all their money out of that system. And now you're making 20% of less money,
Right. And
you know?
by the way,
And
well, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
And of course, a state government is going to be all for raising a minimum wage. Why? You're exempt from this because you have no income tax in Florida. But now, instead of having a bunch of $7.25 minimum wagers you can tax, you have a bunch of $15 an hour wagers that you can tax on their income taxes. So you're going to get more money. It's in your best interest to say, yeah, we're going to raise the minimum wage to 15 bucks an hour. So, of course they're going to go for it.
Well, it
But
is. I was going to say something else, but it is fairly. I can say this fairly confident. Um, if an employee, like, detach it from everything for half a second. Like, I already know beforehand, roughly, the various answers to the things that I pose, because I consume. So I know that there's objections to what I'm going to raise. So I know already, but I'm not necessarily doing that so that the objections, like, I'm just going to plant this in itself.
Mm-hmm.
A person making 750 an hour
Mm-hmm.
being raised to 15 whatever the or $15 the hour as the minimum wage
Mm-hmm.
for that individual is a good freaking day. Like, they're happy now, or more happy than they were making, because more is better than less when it comes to money. But this same more is better than less applies to all the way at the top,
Mm-hmm.
consolidating power, and they have more access to that more than less, than the more and less from this guy at the bottom. The can
Well,
that in itself is true. Now, the arguments of, well, does that mean you're suggesting government interference? None of that. Like, I've already conceded and agreed,
yeah.
actually, before you even suggested it,
Mm-hmm.
how I understand, and what's not appropriate because it's government overreach, this and that.
Right.
But to be fair, bringing in Jim's thing, to be totally fair, um, I know the system. This is how this. I mean, we live in reality,
Sure.
but but it really, it's a freaking abuse, dude. I'm sorry. By me saying that, it's a moral judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying,
And an opinion, but yes.
and a, it's an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's my opinion, and my
Yep.
opinion
And
based on
it's
my,
valid.
and it's my moral
Mm-hmm.
view of it in this big picture. Where would it separate, and where would I not have a moral conflict? I think
Mm-hmm.
is if on the top they were doing what you said that they should be doing, which is not interfering with the economy and looking at individuals participating in a process in a free economy. In
Yeah.
that scenario, in theory, if you look at the free economist types,
Mm-hmm.
well, go ahead. You had something to say.
And you do have CEOs that do things like that. You do have CEOs that do that.
Costco, I think, does something like that.
Um, Arizona Tea.
Yeah,
Arizona Tea. He has done everything in his power to keep their price at 99 cents. He pays his employees above the local average for what they do.
yeah,
Lots of good benefits and everything. And he's gone so far as to go to the can manufacturer, have them redesign the can to make the walls of the can thinner because it's not carbonated, there's no pressure there,
yeah,
to reduce the price on the back end on raw materials to get his product into the can. All of his trucks drive at night, so they're not sitting there idling in traffic. All of their beverages are delivered at night. That saves a buttload of money on fuel. And he just is absolutely refusing to raise the price. His price is 99 cents. If you go to Walmart, Arizona tea is 79 cents
because
for
of
a
volume.
big 23-ounce can because they buy so much of it. Yeah, he gives them a price break because he's moving millions of cans of tea that they're buying. So, yeah, he'll give them a cheaper price because his words, he didn't need to earn that much more money. The man is a billionaire with a B. He's worth $6.8 billion, his total net worth. And he is adamant, almost to the point of violence, you will not raise the price of my product.
And that's his choice
You know?
operate in that way,
Right,
just like it's the choice of the people that pay the CEO in Walmart to
right.
pay him what he wants. I get that point, and that's part of, this company does it this way,
Mm-hmm.
and does it get rewarded by the clientele going to
Mm-hmm.
that store and purchasing the, like, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Um, all that is what happens. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
my thing is that that the data that I mentioned, which no, I don't know if Jim even. Oh, he did look
Hmm.
up. Um, I forgot because we've gone down the road with that. But the data is there. It
Hmm.
exists, and you agreed with it. Everybody has agreed with it, as far as I understand. Where people
Sure.
are the regular average public is Joe Public, Nancy
Hmm.
Public is like sitting right here, and all these big wigs. Not making a judgment call at this point. We
Right.
have done,
Hmm.
they power continues to consolidate and consolidate. Companies continue to consolidate. If not for, we don't, perfect doesn't exist. If not for companies providing products to be on the shelves,
Hmm.
we'd have nothing to buy.
We'd
Uh,
have no money to buy it with.
right, because there would be no employees to. So the
Right.
system,
It all trickles. It all trickles, man.
so the system works in that products are placed and people are buying and people
Hmm.
work to this and that and this. That's working. My
Hmm.
only argument is that people at the top consolidate power and put their thumb on the scale when it comes to the free market.
Hmm.
Um, and that
Yeah, there's a lot of that too.
and that always turns out to not favor.
Well,
It
th-
always turns out to not favor the public on at
well,
every level you look at. In terms of, well, go ahead, go ahead. I was going to say, without their thumb on it, the system's still going to traffic the products to the stores and the this and the that. But their thumb creates this extra. I mean, other people have argued it too. Economists have argued it. They're arguing it now with
hmm,
today's world. When you place the thumb on the economy, that's not a free market. You're manipulating it for
right. I,
your.
I understood, but then again, it's also. Would you agree that it's wrong to look at a CEO's wage and automatically brand him a crook or say he's not worth it or he doesn't deserve it?
I said that before.
You know? Oh, so that's what I'm getting at. It's public perception. Oh, he makes $27 million. He's evil. Screw that. He makes $27 million because he worked his way up to it. You know? It's not like a company as a $27 million CEO and the $12 an hour checkout clerk at the register, and nobody's in between. There's a scale that increases all the way up.
Yeah,
Believe
but
me.
you're
Now,
defending the CEO
no, I'm not defending. I'm
and
not
that.
defending.
Well, let me just make the argument. You're
Well,
saying you're not.
I wasn't done with mine.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But to automatically brand a CEO that makes that much money as he's got to be a crook or he's got to be a criminal or he's not worth it, but you don't bat an eye at a sports figure making more per year
Yeah,
and celebrating that sports figure.
but you're creating this person that's arguing that sports figure is okay, but
No, I mean society at large, because that's what happens. We love Tom Brady. We loved Peyton Manning. We loved Russell Wilson. All of them made more than that Walmart CEO. But we hate the Walmart CEO. I mean, society at large. It's real easy to yell and hate the CEO when you see what kind of money they make.
okay. So
So,
let me. So society at large, they're pro athletes making tons of money, but when it comes to these businesses, they're perceived as something else when in fact the same basics applies to both. You have
yeah,
individuals that are at the pinnacle of
yeah,
society.
it's just a
One
typical
group,
double standard. Yeah,
one group, the sports people are viewed as, wow,
heroes,
this is great, and then the other group, which is this business area, seem to be um,
devils.
castigated because there's something going on. So you're you're making an argument towards a particular
Well,
group of people that are involved in this sort of ideological difference, and you mentioned communism from my parents' country and this and that. You're making an argument with a certain, but you are aware that and I agree. Why that's a contradiction that you highlighted, but you are aware that you're focused on these figures,
Hmm.
and I guess you're doing it to highlight to a certain ideological grouping
Yes.
that there's a misrepresentation and there's a
Yes.
confusion or error in the conclusions. Okay,
Right.
I totally understand.
To put it in a nutshell, my perception is it's not necessarily about the money, because if it was about the money, we'd be yelling at these
Or
quarterbacks and wide receivers with the same voice that we're yelling at the CEOs.
no, okay. So
So
let
it's
me.
not necessarily about the money, it's
No, no,
who's getting it.
no, no. So let me. I get it. I get it. Well, I mean, I literally
Yes,
laid it. Okay,
you did. I was just trying to sum up my view there. Yeah.
okay. We're very aware. I believe. I know for a fact, but
Hmm.
I'll just be slightly coy
Hmm.
that there is a segment of ideology
Hmm.
that this thumb on the CEOs and government
Hmm.
and, or I'm sorry and companies is appropriate um, in order to obtain the results that certain ideologies lean towards.
Hmm.
So it's okay on a sliding scale. Sometimes are exaggerated the scale. In other words, more control than not. In order to have government um, control mechanisms, monies, the way things operate. Um, but so not but that's actually the point. Half of it. The other half is they justify that in order to bring about balance. This is what they would suggest: equalness, fairness, um, control for abuse, and this and that. This is rejected by a certain other ideology. Um, and one of the arguments traditionally offered, which is the argument that I've been making tonight, is that you should not put your thumb as a government entity on businesses, which is an argument that you made.
Hmm.
However, this is not what we see.
No. Why would
Neither,
they?
neither currently
Hmm.
by any stretch.
Right.
Currently, or
Why would the government not put a thumb on those businesses?
well, if I were the government or a
Hmm.
person in the government with such control,
Hmm.
um, I would want from my position here now as a regular person
Hmm.
to think that I would operate in the most in a way that does not damage the most amount of people,
Right.
or twist people's
Hmm.
arms. I would want that, but like Jordan Peterson, I go to it because it's such a good, and I dislike most of the things he says, or not most, a lot of the stuff, and yet a lot of the other stuff is great stuff. Um, he says, if you were in World War II behind enemy lines and you
Hmm.
think you're a good guy, well, anyways, he says, you don't know. I don't know what I would do if I was in that position. I
No.
may want to do good, but once
Hmm.
I'm in that seat, who knows what the
But
hell?
since we're not talking about any one person in any one seat, we're talking about the government as an
Yeah, yeah,
entity.
yeah.
What interest do they have in letting up the pressure on companies? Because you're right about one thing, it's all about extraction.
I'm
And if
right
they're
about that.
getting, and if they're, well, no, well, you're right about more than one thing, but your words, your exact words, it is all about extraction. Because if they can extract 3%, if they put a little bit of pressure over here instead of over here, or in addition to over here, because once there's pressure applied, it's never coming off, they can raise that to 3.5%. They're going to do it.
If
Why
I,
wouldn't they? Why
it,
wouldn't they do it? You
it's
know?
wait, yes, I agree. It's the same thing as saying if you're an employee at a supermarket,
Mm-hmm.
and your boss says, "Hey, Mark, from now on, we're going to pay you an extra dollar,"
Mm-hmm.
and now Mark is working at that job with an extra dollar in his income per hour,
Mm-hmm.
and then would that Mark in that job with that extra dollar ever give up that extra dollar for giggles?
No, he'd
No.
never give it up, but he would, and probably wouldn't even notice that he's not getting that dollar on his paycheck because more tax is being taken out. And maybe at the end of the year, that was just enough to put him into a higher tax bracket. So he's actually making less by earning more.
I don't know. I've heard that before, but I don't think that that's necessarily.
It
There's
it it
people
it,
that,
it it doesn't happen all the time, but there are situations where that happens. Um, Now, this is gonna look like I'm slamming the brakes on this discussion. I'm not. I've got to address something
yeah,
from
yeah.
Jim because, and I had it up and the chat moved, and now I got to go back and find it. When I was talking about the minimum wage, was never meant to be a living wage. It's not a living wage. It never was meant to be a living wage.
And
What I
nothing is.
mean, what I mean by that is how I can't find where he said it. Yeah, because the unskilled, uneducated don't deserve to earn enough to eat. Jim, stop the hyperbole. That's not what I said. A minimum wage job traditionally was an entry level job that was done by high school students who didn't have a family to support. What I mean by a living wage is you're not supposed to be trying to support a family on a minimum wage job. You can't feed a family of four on $15 an hour work on the drive-through. When it comes to the point to where you aren't making enough money to support your lifestyle, that's the market knocking you on the forehead and telling you that you've got to improve your skills or your education to make more money. It is not incumbent upon McDonald's to pay you more because you have a kid.
Yeah,
That's none of their business. It's not their job to
Mark.
finance that.
Okay, so
So my point was minimum wage jobs were traditionally what you and I did after school or during summer vacation, working for a little extra cash, but we didn't pay rent because
okay,
we still live with mom and dad and things like
okay,
that.
but today,
Hmm.
today, and for a decade or more,
Yeah.
that that framing no longer apply. More the closer this way we go. Back, that exact thing applied,
Hmm.
but that does not apply any longer.
Right,
In
because
that,
more and more companies have found that they can pay minimum wage. You know, uh, if the government tells me I've got to pay $15 an hour for a job, I have to pay $15 an hour for a job. Doesn't matter to me who really is doing the job. It can be a high school student, it could be a college student, it could be that 50-year-old retiree. I'm probably not going to hire the 30 something because he wants a house. I'm going to ask him, why are you looking for a minimum wage job? But so many people are paying that minimum wage, it's becoming the norm because we have eliminated the middle class. We've eliminated those middle class jobs.
and
You know,
how did that happen? Who's at fault?
lots of reasons. Lots. You can't point at any one person.
Who's
Because when the steel industry went away, the people that make cars and the people that make washing machines and refrigerators had to start buying from overseas, which raised their costs. Now their products are more expensive. You know, it's not any one person that you can point your finger at it and say they're the ones that killed the economy. They're the ones that killed the minimum wage. There's a huge number of variables in there. Probably our biggest industry right now that you could kind of sort of relate to manufacturing would be electronics and software. But even then, America's not all that good at making chips. We're just not good at it. So the number one places we're going to get chips for those computers and those electronics are going to be overseas. And that's a problem.
So this idea of okay, so this idea of having more manufacturing
Mm-hmm.
is a good idea because, for me, in my opinion, and there might be
Yeah.
facts to back it up or evidence to back it up, but well, this is what's being this suggested and done to bring back manufacturing. I think that that's a good idea. It's a reasonable idea
Mm-hmm.
because that means now you have more, not only let's say paper straw factory. I mean, but let's say
Yeah.
you also have the surrounding consequence of it, like you know, coffee shops and retailers and that surround it. Like if you reproduce that sort of thing, you create movement because people also spend their money or
Mm-hmm.
bring in supplies that service the straw making like all the chain that's involved in that, and so
Sure.
that's good. It ripples out and stuff, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, I think that that's a good idea. But this is what I wanted to say earlier on. Um, they're talking about AI
Mm-hmm.
in other ways now too, which is a concern. I It's a concern where AI will this is like will replace, just like the just like when the Model Ts came out and it started and the horse was like, "Hey, how about me?"
Yeah.
Um, well, yeah. So like
Well,
now the question is, will AI? How much? Okay, the question is this: we don't know, but how
mhm.
much will AI do away with people's
Employees.
yeah.
Well, that this argument, take out the letters AI. This argument's been going on for generations because it was in the '60s. It was the when manufacturing plants started using robotics and automating their assembly lines, where you didn't have a one guy put a cap on the bottle and the next guy pop it down
That's
and the
right.
next guy put it in the case. Now
That's
it's all done by machines.
yeah.
Make no mistake, if it's at all possible for your job to be done by a machine,
It will
it
be.
will be.
Yeah.
It may not be yet, but think of it this way. The big thing right now is self driving cars. When they get that perfected, what's the next step? Self driving trucks. So there's truck drivers out of work. Truck driver is a pretty good paying job.
Yeah.
So if it's even remotely possible for your job to be done by a machine, it's gonna be. So what's the answer to that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that. And in a lot of scenarios, it is kind of scary.
It's the same as an example, just to put it in
Mm-hmm.
a little cubicle, um, of a multifunctioning fax machine printer. Before the multifunctioning fax and printer thing, an individual that we now can have in well, actually, that's even old news now.
Mm-hmm.
But like, let's say at the time that it was popular at home,
Mm-hmm.
people would go out to the Office Max and purchase their multifunctional, an
Mm-hmm.
eraser ad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, prior to that, people would go to places like a Kinko's
Yeah.
or some sort of office thing to do the actual.
Mm-hmm.
There was a transition where people would wait in line for faxes at the Office Depot, if you
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
I was in those lines many a times myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you could do it from home, and then it kept going, and then all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden that's all a wash,
And
So yeah,
there were certain places, and there still are to this day, there are certain places that have to use fax machines. When I was in real estate, all the way up to 2018, we had a fax machine in the office because certain things had to have an actual person's signatures. Digital signatures were not legal, and they still aren't in a few states. So if you have a client that signs a contract to purchase a house, so you're signing the contract to make the offer, they would sign it, and I would go straight over to the fax machine and I would transmit that over to the selling agent. We couldn't use digital signatures. That eventually changed, and we could use digital signatures. And the fax machine started getting used less and less and less, unless it was a transaction that had anything to do with California. They still required those, they wouldn't allow digital signatures. So there are certain industries that still use fax machines. There are certain industries that still use dot matrix printers because they have to use an original form with carbon paper in between. So
Old
a
school.
lot of this old tech is still, you know,
But
but it's not the thing. But you can
the
go back even further than that, because before the movable type press that Gutenberg came up with in the 1400s, all books were hand copied. That was a job, copying books. And all the way up into the 1800s, there was a job called a Scrivener, and like a legal document. They didn't have a photocopy machine. So what you had groups of 5, 10, 20 people copying legal documents. You need 20 copies of this. You had people handwriting copies, and all of these copies had to be signed. Then all of a sudden, the printing press came along and books were no longer being handwritten. A lot of those people went out of business. Then later on, print was invented. The old mimeograph machines that put the Scriveners out of business. I mean, you can go way back to people using hand looms, making a blanket a week, to the automated jacquard looms that were making a blanket a day. If your job can be done by a machine, it will be. So, Steve made a point here. He said AI won't take away jobs, it will just change the type of jobs that are needed. That's true, to a point, but it's going to depend on the application
did he
of
just
that
say that?
AI. Huh?
Did he just write that?
About 5 minutes ago, yeah.
Okay, because if it was immediate, I was gonna say that's absurd. Just for a fact.
But it's going to depend on how that's done. Because, for instance, I'll give you. I said some of the AI scenarios are scary to me. I'm not thinking in the terms of Skynet or anything like that. But
I
which would you trust right now? You go to the you get your leg gets broken in 3 places, and you go to the emergency room, and they stabilize you and everything, but now they got to send you into surgery. They got to pin those bones back together. You want a doctor with his experience doing that surgery, or do you want an AI doing it? Or an AI deciding what you need?
oh well, if it's it I can envision so I can envision a time when it will get to the point where it will be so sophisticated, the optics, the lasers, the whole thing, that you're put on some sort of gurney, whatnot. You're rolled into things secured. Certain cameras detect your limbs,
Mm-hmm.
vital sign. Like the whole thing is being trajectorized. They can see infrared through, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
you want to call it. I don't know what vision to go through the
Yeah.
skin, X-ray type, or and they
Mm-hmm.
can
Yeah.
momentarily
MRI.
shoot through, and like all that stuff. I can and see a time when they roll your butt in. They go,
Yeah, and you never see a doctor. That
and
scares the hell out of me. Call me old school. I mean, yeah, I'm all for x-rays, I'm all for MRIs and everything, but I want a human being standing there reading the results of that and going, we got to fix this, this, and this. I don't want some computer, um, save my ass. I don't want some AI trying to diagnose me. Give me a doctor. That's why they went to medical school. That's why they went into internship. That's why they did their residency. That I want that experience working on me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but I can see a time
You know,
when that would it would likely go in that direction. Like from
it's
here,
gonna go in that direction. I'm telling you, it's gonna go in that direction.
but from where we're at now till then,
Hmm.
I think is I don't know how long, but I think it's a stretch. But I would imagine that AI will be more and more incorporated. I
It
just
it it
I don't
already is. AI is enhancing X-rays and MRIs and things like that. I say give it 10 years and you'll have AIs diagnosing patients.
dude, AI is even translating ancient unknown languages.
Yeah, but how do we know they're right? That's my problem. How do we know they're right?
Well,
You know,
I
I
mean,
mean, you and I can sit down with an ancient unknown language and decide that this little curly Q means A and that little curly Q over there means E. But are we right?
well, let
Yeah,
me so
we're
let me
getting way off base, but okay, this is fun.
no, I'll share this with you. And this is like nothing. It's within the scope, but it's kind of a thing in terms of AI and what this and that. Um, when I have been interacting with AI, which is kind of your fault, your initiation, through the computer that you sent me through, and I was like, "Oh, dude, that's so cool." Remember we?
Yeah.
I've had a lot of sessions. I've thrown everything on the kitchen sink at it. That's a big thing to say. I haven't thrown everything at it, but it's to say that I've really pushed at it in areas that I've was interested in to see what it would say. The AI that I'm using, which is the Copilot one,
Hmm.
is set to assist human beings, users, with organizing, be it charts or answering questions or keeping up to date with like stuff like that, and maybe some a little bit of pushing that. But and with the expectation that that humans would use it for other means. That's what
Hmm.
the makers of it,
Yeah.
Microsoft,
Hmm.
intended, with a little bit of a broad leeway, but it's
Yeah.
still meant to be an assistant.
And they didn't anticipate Eloy, did they?
I've asked it so many different things and gone on sessions. I've spent 3 to 4 hour sessions arguing points and listening to its answers, and
That's
then
what I mean.
and it can't tell time. So I've marked the beginning of a session to the end, and
Hmm.
then I've given them. You know how long we've been on this? I don't know, 3 point something hours. I'll tell them, and it's, oh my goodness, it'll say like you can see. But
So,
anyway, the, the reason, well, because what I've found is, Mark, that this this program allows me to throw at it, whereas like you and I in a conversation, we have a human um time where exchanges, like the feedback you'll give to me
uh-huh.
is valuable because it's unexpected from your point of view with your experience and so on. You're not AI.
Right.
But where you differ from AI is that this program, and where I differ from it is that it's like having a librarian that has read all the books in the library, and that on command can not only bring up the reference, but but the residual or lateral references from what people are saying currently
Yeah.
about that topic or have said in the past, and what that means, um, in terms of the implications of what that means and this and that. So, in other words, it's a way for you to bounce off anything you want to throw at it.
Ideas. Yeah.
And then when you hear the answers, it opens up other possible doors that you would not have thought of. And then you question it on that, and it just tumbleweeds into different areas. But here's the thing: This AI,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, this is a little bit, but I'm gonna throw it out there, is a reflection of oneself. We understand that this belongs to Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
I get that, but this is where I'm going with this. Based on what it does and how it interacts with you,
Mm-hmm.
it's on pause, a blank nothingness until you come to it
Right.
and begin to frame what you're seeking to explore.
Right.
When you begin that, it begins to calculate the words you use, the way you punctuate, and the concepts that you add and leave out. So if you're talking about Lincoln's history
Mm-hmm.
in the early days of his presidency, how it
Yeah.
tumbled into a civil war based on the states get like all this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
it will calculate what you left out
Mm-hmm.
to basically start to refine where you're at with
Mm-hmm.
what you may not know or you're holding back but didn't add to steer the ship. So it's a reflection, depending on what you ask, of the scope that you're giving it. So if you're a guy that's into like Superman
Mm-hmm.
comic books, you're like, hey, I'd like to know Superman. It's gonna reflect back to you
Mm-hmm.
your level
Right.
of interest, your topic of interest.
Uh-huh.
It's gonna reflect back to you your sort of like world.
Yeah.
So
With the
in a
limitations that you have set, knowingly or unknowingly.
yeah, wherever your mind is set at,
Well,
if you're
it.
into like coin collecting, it's going to reflect back to you
Mm-hmm.
an image of a world that you're familiar with. So this is
Right.
what I'm getting at. This is what I'm getting at. If AI exists, which it does, and its purpose is to give you what you ask of it in terms of knowledge, this,
Mm-hmm.
that, the other, it is only as good for your purposes as you are capable
Yeah.
of using it.
It's only as good as the questions it's being asked.
Right.
And
Yeah.
my argument, Jim had made a comment I got to throw at you. It's hilarious. AI can't even get the number of fingers on a person. Okay. AI can't even get the number of fingers a person has right. You could end up working in a circus after an AI operation. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
gold, Jim. That's gold. And there's the big reason for that. And one of my main concerns with AI and our reliance on AI, you kind of compared it to having a discussion with me, with us two having a discussion right here. Here's the difference: we are people. We know what that means. We know what it's like to be a person. We know that there are certain physical limits, there are certain psychological limits. We know that people have failures, they have faults, and they have virtues. An AI knows nothing about people, it knows nothing about being a person. It's there to give you answers to the questions you ask, and that's its job only.
Yeah. It doesn't have
It
prerequisites over
mm-hmm.
allowing you to ask it whatever you want. It doesn't care if you offend it.
Right,
None of that.
right. But see, it's that humanity or the lack thereof that bothers me about AI's decision making, because Jim's point is 100% correct. You go into AI and you've seen it. It can't even get the number of fingers on a person's hand right. Ask it to make an image. And not all the time, but a good percentage of the time, something's wrong. The nose is over here a little bit, or the eyes are all screwed up. AI has a problem with eyes. It knows nothing about humanity. The only thing it knows about humanity is what it's finding on Wikipedia or some other reference. It knows nothing about what it means to be human.
Okay, so that framing, um, so I'll say this to answer Jim's thing. One, imagine you, Jim, having a friend next to you that's a librarian, a scholar, that tags along with you everywhere you go on your daily routine, except that they don't feel bad if you're mean, they don't cry, they don't laugh. All they have is raw data and the interpretation according to what exists out there. So imagine having this librarian slash person next to you that has virtually countless newspapers, um, books, all the data out there, and you, as you're walking, say, "Oh, by the way, I'd like to know about the pyramids. Who was that investigator in 1937 that discovered that thing? Oh, it was such and such and such and such. Yeah, what were they doing? What was how long was their trip? And like you, so you know that. But if you're asking it, paint me a picture of a human being, and it gives you five fingers and this and that. That part of it is different. That's to do with video or photo.
Well,
That calculation is a different thing than what I'm talking about in terms
okay,
of like data and data
okay,
processing and such. Oh,
and
well,
that
not to do with video, let's say.
and that goes to my point about what it doesn't know what a person is. It doesn't know what it's like to be a person. It has no concept of that. It doesn't know that most humans, not all, there are always going to be exceptions, have four fingers and a thumb. You know, it knows there are some things there, but it doesn't know what they are. It doesn't know how many it's supposed to have. In your example, you're talking about the friend with you who doesn't get mad, who doesn't care if you offend it, who doesn't laugh, who doesn't cry. That friend has had the humanity stripped out of it, and it's just an answering machine. And
No,
I
but
don't mean in the sense of answering the phone. I mean answering the questions that you have.
yeah, it's but this idea that it's human or could ever be human.
Well, no, it could never be human. An AI can never be human. And but you can't really basically it's I have a major problem with the stripping away of humanity involved in that in a lot of those decisions. There you go, Momo Adad. Welcome aboard. New face. Good to see you. Agreed. AI will not feel, but will probably judge. I think that's a fair statement. I
But
think that's a fair statement, and I have
but
a problem with it.
yeah, I don't know that that's either a fair statement or not fair statement because what do they mean by judge?
Well, I can see an AI replacing judges in a courtroom.
Oh, you mean a literal judge?
Yeah, I could see that.
Oh, huh. Let me think for Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is my
Uh,
answer to that. But they can judge. If it's that you're saying,
that's what I'm saying. I don't know that that's what Momo Haddad is saying.
okay,
Uh, a gray, he says, agree. AI will not feel, but will probably judge. Now, have
That
let
sounds
me.
to me. You know what that sounds to me that he's
Mhm.
saying.
Okay.
Sounds to me that he's saying they don't feel this and that, but they calculate out conclusions. But
Yeah,
what? Go ahead.
based on your experience, because I was going to ask you a follow up on that. Based on your experience, because you've gone so far with Copilot, and I haven't even turned the some bitch on. Um,
You could go online. It's free on. Like you can go on Google and
right.
just type in Coke, and you can access it there.
But have you, in your experience with AI, found it that it has judged something or someone? Has it come to a conclusion?
Yeah. If it again, remember that I. So if you interact with AI,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to reflect back to you where you're. So, like for instance, if I am interacting with AI the way I am,
Mm-hmm.
where I ask it questions, and I'm constantly like with it.
Yeah.
And this is a little example of how we interact and stuff. Imagine the way we interact,
Mm-hmm.
but full throttle. I'm not gonna hold back, and I'm tossing crap. I'm everything. Imagine full. Imagine the insanity. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about the. I end up over here. Why did we end up in Mars? I don't know. Okay, let's get back. Like, like,
Yeah.
imagine full throttle everything at it. It's not going to act or reply to me. Thus far, I've not seen that.
Mm-hmm.
With something like, let's talk about let's talk about Mork and Mindy. Why don't we? It's
Yeah.
not gonna
No,
stray.
understood.
No, but this is important. It is reacting to the input that you're giving it,
Right.
and it is judging your. It's not. You can say judging. It's taking into account and calculating your tone,
Right.
your choice of words, the content and level of the structures that you're using.
Understood.
So it's only reflecting that. It's not really going to say,
Okay,
well,
but my question further, has it ever come out with a pronouncement like, well, this person was a bad person, or this person was immoral, or acting immoral? It's never made any of those kinds of judgments, because Momo did come back and say, um, I also meant like social score judging.
that's what I thought. Your implication, you, Mark Lindsay's implication, is on another level of worry.
Mm-hmm.
But to the person's implication, Momo's implication, um, you as a human
Mm-hmm.
translate it as a judgment because you're human, but it is giving you data collated.
Mm-hmm.
But when it does so, to answer your question of have you seen it judge, when you ask it to judge, when you imply it, when
Okay.
you
Okay.
underlining below surface or suggesting it in the
Mm-hmm.
way you're trying, it knows the way you're trying to. So I've I've even tried to work around it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had it confused over my intent,
Yeah.
so it's not
But you.
understanding what my intent,
Okay.
and I've had to clarify to broaden its. Oh, that's sarcasm, and then it
Mm-hmm.
it, it aligns itself with sarcasm.
Mm-hmm.
So language is language, and the same confusions can occur. But all it's doing is calculating out
Okay.
all those things with reference points
Okay.
to arrive at an answer to you that's reflected back at you. But what it'll most of the time do is give
Okay.
you a pro and con in its structured
Okay.
paragraph as an answer. So it'll
Okay.
say, this political figure, experts have said that this political figure's intentions are
Ah.
such and such, and then it'll give you a series of links. However, other people say what you
Oh, okay.
suggest, meaning that this is the route such and such and such, and then it'll give you some more links.
Okay. So it tries to back off and not be the definitive answer and just give you. Okay, I see what it's doing. Okay.
Yeah, if
Um.
if a discussion, last thing, if there's a discussion in popular culture
Mm-hmm.
that's complicated, where some people say one thing and other people
Mm-hmm.
say another,
Mm-hmm.
it'll do that. It'll
Okay.
give you that.
Okay.
It won't just say period. It won't do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. And that's this particular AI. An AI that's designed to be a judge would be completely different. Jim made a comment when I talked about judges in a courtroom. He said, "Hardly a jury of your peers." No, judges, not juries.
Yeah, but
Not every case goes before a jury. You get a traffic ticket, and the judge, oh, $100 fine. Something like that could be done by an AI. You either ran
no.
the red light or you didn't.
My instinct is leaning towards what Jim said.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to confront your acute like a machine. The implicate. I think that that would be fought tooth and nail. Would it
Oh,
ever be?
no doubt, no doubt, it'll be fought tooth and nail. But I could see it happening.
Could you
I
no?
could
But could you
see it coming to pass.
no? Could you imagine? You know how you have the right
Okay.
to contest your trial. Could you imagine
Mm-hmm.
in the same session you've got 5 minutes?
Yeah,
Okay, Your Honor, this and that. It says sorry, guilty, and then are you ready for your second?
but that doesn't eliminate your right to appeal that decision. The
No,
judge could be an AI that says you're guilty, and you're okay, fine. I'm appealing that decision.
no, but
You.
I'm saying in the same session,
Mm-hmm.
you got a 5 minute thing. It says you're guilty, and then you say, okay, I want to appeal, and say appeal process guilty.
Well, well, now you're in Futurama. But Jim wanted to know: has Eloy ever challenged a co-pilot to make an argument against its own information?
Yeah, I've not done that, but I would assume that it would because I have given it roles to play. Um, I've had them argue my against my points, but I haven't had them argue against the truth or evidence. Um, but they will play the role of being a bad faith actor.
Mm-hmm.
They will play those roles in order for you to learn, to assist you in learning. But yeah, yeah.
So,
I
okay,
mean,
I know
it's just a tool.
I know you're having fun with it. Didn't you tell me that you got it to find you basically got it to shut down and it wouldn't answer you anymore?
Yeah, it got to the point where it would basically I don't remember the actual thing. It's just I've had so many sessions with it across different topics, but it got to the point where I've argued it
Uh-huh.
to fold.
Mm-hmm. Where it just gives up?
Yeah, because what it does sometimes, well, no, it accepts.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get it to because you're working with ones and zeros here. That's
Yeah,
calculating everything.
but basically you got it to end of the session and say, "Oh, okay," and then done.
Yeah, but the way to get
That's
there,
funny. Mm-hmm.
the oh yeah, but the way to get there is that you have to be as irrefutable
Mm-hmm.
as possible. And the way so let me give you an example. If I asked it a question
Mm-hmm.
and it gave me an answer, it starts off general because it doesn't know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
So if it gives you an answer, if I start off hard hitting
Uh-huh.
and it gives you an answer, it doesn't know you yet.
Mm-hmm.
Because every session is a new session for it. It doesn't know you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's picking up now from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
If you hit it hard at the beginning, in a concise way, not overblown, but
Mm-hmm.
just enough, it'll answer you in a way that leaves open fields enough so that you can come back and argue it
Mm-hmm.
and say no. And then you start to, it wants to give you the best answer possible,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to give you the counter arguments.
Okay.
If it's not, if it's not, if you're hell bent on one conclusion, and you're right, and you're on the right. If you're on the right,
Mm-hmm.
it will eventually succumb.
Mm-hmm.
It might not see where you're going in terms of, and it'll keep giving you broad but if you're on the right, if your foundation is, because it's not going to say, okay, fine, screw it. No, you have to be right according to all the data it has available to offer and to process. You have to be right for it to accept that you're right.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
so it's not an easy shortcut.
Okay.
It's a tool. It doesn't have feelings, as far as we can tell. It doesn't have emotions, isn't that? It's not even
Mm-hmm.
meant to be a human. It only looks
No.
like a human interacting with you so that you understand what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
But it's nothing to do with human this and that
And
at
it's
all.
also a specific AI that's designed to do one thing and one thing only.
It's an
You
assistant.
know? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we need to land the plane. We've been on 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I've got
Okay.
to get my pain meds.
Okay. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed it. We go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time here on the Trampled Underfoot podcast show on YouTube. We also have a site over at Facebook. You can check that out where we post videos and images and such over the topics we talk about. And we also have a website which is trampled underfoot podcast.com.
Calm.
and, you can, and you can catch past episodes, download them over there as well. And we're also sponsored by.
Play with the banners. I'm still new to this, but at least I got them this week. Harneal Media. Look, if you're even thinking about toying with the idea of maybe, possibly one day establishing a website, there's nobody I'll recommend other than Steve over at harnealmedia.com. I got to tell you, he's very, very competitively priced. He knows what he's doing. He does it very, very well. If you're looking to do a blog type website, he can hook you up. If you want a web store where you can offer your products or your services to the public at large without paying commissions, without paying listing fees, and without having your competition's products being advertised on the same page. He can hook you up with that too. Maybe you've got some ideas for merch and you want to sell t-shirts with your logo or your designs on them, baseball caps, mouse pads, coffee cups. He can hook you up with a print on demand company that'll take care of all of that fulfillment. They collect all the money, they collect all the tax money, they take care of all the shipping. You just sit back and watch the orders come in and take your percentage. I'll never ever endorse anybody other than Steve over at Harneal Media. So do yourself a favor. You'll find a link to Harneal Media down in the description box of this live stream and every other live stream and video on this channel. And it's that way for a reason. Get over there, click that contact us link, and shoot Steve a message. Believe me, you'll be glad you did. That's Harneal Media, HARNEAL Media.com, sponsor of TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com.
That was awesome.
No, you're awesome.
So, folks, we hope you enjoyed this episode. It was magical. But we're going to have to get out of here. So, till next time, we'll see you. Be safe, do the things you enjoy, and that wasn't supposed to. I was trying to experiment with what that was. I thought that was going to be a dun 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 dun. Dun. It wasn't
No,
that.
it wasn't that. And actually, it was pretty accurate.
Anyways, we're out of here. I enjoyed I like the magic twinkle twinkle thing. We're out of here, guys.
Have a good one. Be nice to one another.